Hey everybody, so today we're going to be looking really closely at the character Zane, but before I get into my examination, spoiler alert for Mistborn Era 1, if you haven't read the series, go pick it up, it is phenomenal. But let's just start off with, I want to talk about why Zane is such an interesting character, why I feel like he's a little polarizing, but I think a lot of people tend to enjoy him as a character. And I think that the first thing to touch on is Zane's conception. If we're looking for a window into kind of Zane's mental state, because I mean that is what makes this character so interesting, is his unstable mentality. We have to look at his conception, and we know that Venture wanted a Mistborn, and so he did some terrible things to a bunch of Ska women, and eventually, was lucky, and he had a Mistborn son. And I think that what we can take away from this is that we know that Zane was always looked at by his father as a tool. That is what Straff saw him as. He saw him as a tool for potential political gain, potential just gain in general. He saw Zane as something to be used as a chess piece. And I think that can tell you right away that even before the hermalurgic, gosh, that word is so hard to say. Before the spike in Zane, he didn't exactly have the best upbringing. I mean, he forced to live in the shadows. I mean, Ellen was always the golden boy, so to speak. I mean, Zane was always gonna have problems. I think even without the spike. Then he also had, and this is left ambiguous to the reader. Someone comment down below if I'm incorrect on this, but I don't believe we ever get an explanation as to how Zane came about having the spike inside of him. But he has one there, and for most of his life, he is whispers in his ear from Ruin, and that, I find it so interesting how this messed with Zane's mentality. And then I think that we can see this relationship that Zane has to this voice in his head. I think we can see some pretty clear inspirations from Wheel of Time. I won't get into what specifically for spoiler reasons, but I think that we can see this being an inspiration from Wheel of Time, and I think that that's really interesting because we know that Brandon Sanderson has a very close relationship to Wheel of Time, having finished the series. And so I think that we get this unstable mentality, and I think that leads a lot of people to really liking Zane. I mean, we see early on he has this, our introduction to him, he has this camaraderie with Vin. And we like that. We like, anything good that happens to Vin. I feel like most people are going to like that. When we see that good things are happening to Vin, we like that. Anything that brings Vin joy, because Vin has had such a difficult life. Us as a reader, we are going to like someone that brings Vin some joy. And obviously, in the perfect Vin way, the joy comes through sparring, through brutal sparring. And so that's our introduction to Zane. So I think already we'll have kind of a bit of an affinity towards Zane as the reader, because of this pleasure that he brings towards Vin. But then the other really interesting thing is that Zane represents this really interesting parallel between with Elend, and we see these two sides of the same coin, one forced to live in the shadows, one forced to basically expected to take the mantle someday of House Venture. And Zane obviously fosters a lot of resentment towards Elend because of that. And I think that also gives us, a little bit of insight into why Zane isn't exactly fond of his brother. And I think that that's what makes him such an interesting, morally great character, is because while we don't necessarily agree with Zane's actions, I at least we can empathize with the fact that that's probably not a good upbringing. And when you have this voice in your head that tells you to kill literally everyone except for Vin, and that's what I'm going to talk about next, but when you have this voice that tells you to kill everyone, I mean, that's not the recipe for a stable person. And so we can really empathize with Zane in that way, even though he does some pretty bad things. But then, we know that he doesn't, and at the point in the story where we're reading about Zane, we don't exactly know what the point of this voice is. And so when we realize that the voice doesn't want Zane to kill Vin, I mean, it's like, does this mean there's some sort? I mean, is it just because Zane likes her? Does he have like romantic feelings? That's pretty heavily implied, and it's just like, I think that we get, what we can take away from this is that Zane is this tortured individual. I mean, you just feel so bad for him. But that he is really attached to Vin. But when we see that Vin ultimately denies him, when Zane, basically he wants Vin to choose between him and Elend, and Vin eventually chooses Elend. I found that very satisfying. I was always a little sad that the doubt was there, but I mean, the doubt is fine. It's fine that the doubt was there, but she ultimately does choose Elend, and when we see Zane just kind of snap, and I mean, we get the awesome reveal with Orsur is actually Tensoon. I can't stop talking about that reveal. That was so awesome. Zane shows his true colors, and I think that it's not that he didn't like Vin before, but he saw Vin as like his only way out. And I think that is interesting that, you know, we get a pretty tragic death, in my opinion, from Zane when Vin kills him, just because I mean, this is someone that lived a tragic life, and just the taunting at the end with Ruin telling him that he wasn't actually crazy. I mean, what? That's just awful. I mean, Zane just had such a difficult life, and even though he did some terrible things, I think that we as a reader can enjoy him because we can empathize. I think that that is the biggest strength of Zane as a character. Also, powerful Mistborn. I mean, everyone loves characters who are exceptional at things, and I think that we can also judge that Zane is very exceptional. Not as exceptional as Vin, of course, but very exceptional. And so overall, that's kind of my closer look at Zane. Let me know what you guys think. If you have any recommendations for how I could have improved on, things that you liked about this examination, or characters that you would like to see me examine. It doesn't just have to be Mistborn, any characters. Definitely let me know. And yeah, if you guys disagreed with anything I said, please leave a comment down below. But if you enjoyed the video, make sure to like and subscribe, and have a great